When it comes time to set pricing, do you feel your heart rate rising? Do you feel a sense of uncertainty? Let's do better. So what will you get out of this presentation? Basically, what I want to do is to transform the way that you think about pricing, proposals, and negotiations. So a typical team, when they're creating pricing, they basically kind of shoot from the hip. They pull a number out of the air and they see how it feels, and then they go for it. When critical negotiations come up, those negotiations are approached from a sense of anxiousness and fear, and the results of the negotiation are highly based on kind of circumstance and emotion. What really good teams do is they craft win-win proposals based on understanding what their own interests are and what the interests of the counterparty are. And when they go into negotiations, they're going in with a clear sense of where they are, where they want to get to, and how that's going to intersect with the other side strategy as well. So the outcome is it's not driven by emotion, it's driven by strategy. So how do we get there? There are basically 4 questions that you should ask yourself as you're coming up with a proposal or approaching a negotiation. And the answer to the question of like what pricing should we offer is kind of a function of considering these 4 questions basically in order. So the first question is, what is our goal, right? And basically that is kind of designed to help us think about what our priorities in that negotiation are and what we can be flexible on. So one way of thinking about your goal is to say, we want to get X and we're willing to trade Y. The next question to consider is how strong is your position, right? This is going to shape kind of your balance of pursuing your asks versus making the offers that you want to make. And so think about, how well have you really proven value to the customer and what alternatives do they have? Another question to consider is how many rounds remain in the negotiation. And this is absolutely essential in complex deals and complex negotiations, because those negotiations very often happen in many steps. And so one of the worst mistakes you can make is to give up all of your flexibility in round 1 when it turns out that there's actually 6 different rounds to that negotiation. And then finally, consider what pricing you should offer. Right? And this is the last question. Right? There's no intelligent way to answer this question until you thought about your goal, your position, and kind of where you are in the negotiation. So think about what you want to offer in the next interaction, and think about potential compromises that you might accept as a counteroffer. Now, as you are considering these 4 questions, there are 5 other points that you should keep in mind throughout. So first off, you should be looking for compatible interests. In other words, ways in which your interests actually fit together pretty well with the interests of your counterparty. So for example, you might really prioritize volume, right? A larger deal, and they might really prioritize a low unit price. And so these interests are compatible, right? You could say, if you're willing to give us a large volume deal, we'll give you a low unit price, right? That would be a win-win trade, which ultimately is what we really want to get out of one of these negotiations. Well, when you're kind of starting a negotiation conversation, one thing to think about doing is to identify your pricing levers before you offer specific concessions. And so here's what I mean by that. So you often will have pricing levers. These are basically things that the prospect could do that would earn them a better price, right? So for example, if they give you more volume, you can offer them a better unit price. It's often a good idea to start out by kind of identifying what those levers are, rather than making specific counter proposals once you're actually in a conversation. And the reason for that is that you want to figure out like which of the levers that you have that could get them a better price, like which of those levers are interesting to them. And once you know what's interesting to them, then you can pursue that and see if there's a win-win trade to be had. Another key point here is that you should be ready to explain your position, not just state it. In other words, don't go into the negotiation kind of planning to pound the table. go in planning to explain why what you're offering is fair and is advantageous for both sides. When you kind of go in hoping to do the negotiation this way, that creates a right kind of tone for both sides to be open about what their interests are, to find compatible interests, and really to craft a kind of win-win trade. Now, having said that, not every negotiation conversation is going to be a creative discussion about win-win trades. You need to understand your counterparty's role in that negotiation, because you're going to talk to a lot of different people over the course of a complex deal, and they have really different roles and really different perspectives. You only want to be flexible and creative when you're talking to somebody who is thoughtful, creative, and flexible. So here's an example, right? Over the course of a deal, you might find yourself first talking about pricing with a manager from the purchasing department. And in that early conversation, that manager, they're not really empowered to make a deal. They're just kind of curious about your pricing structure. So there isn't much point in making a really bold offer. And then later on, you might talk to a junior procurement analyst, right? And that person, like they're there just to get a discount out of you, right? And there's not much point in trying to come up with some really creative, interesting idea, because that's not their role in the negotiation. So don't do anything too bold when you're talking to them. Just get past them while giving up as little as possible. And then finally, you might end up talking to the CFO or to the VP, who's the head of the department. Well, this is a person who is a thoughtful business person who really understands the underlying interests. And that's a person where it's really worth trying to have a creative conversation. And then finally, judge power dispassionately. This is one of the toughest things to do. Power is not about you. Right? You don't have power because you're an amazing negotiation, right? You have power based on the situation. And you might have power in one situation, but not have power in another. It's easy to screw this up. Candidly, I have screwed it up. If you check out our negotiation article, I'll tell you a story about a time when I messed this up, and I'll give you some guidelines for how to dispassionately think through how much power you actually have in that specific situation. Okay, we have all of our great principles kind of in mind. How do we actually go about coming up with our pricing and our proposal? So the key tool for this is called the negotiation strategy spreadsheet. And there's basically a strategy section that helps us formulate our overall approach, a proposal section where we think about the numbers, and then finally a negotiation section where we kind of get ready for an upcoming pricing conversation. So here's a strategy section, and this basically is the four kind of questions to consider. We're defining our goal, right? We want to get a large deal by the end of the quarter, and we're willing to offer a good unit price to make that happen. We're considering the strength of our position, how many rounds are remaining, and kind of what our overall approach is. The next part of the strategy spreadsheet is the proposal section, right? So this is going to do the math for us, right? Which is actually really helpful because we want to use all of our brain power on making sure that the pricing fits with our strategy. And hopefully what we're going to find is a way to craft kind of a good win-win trade. So here's an example proposal section. And this is a great example of what you might do in a situation where you want a large deal by the end of the quarter and you're willing to compromise on the unit price in order to get that. So you'll see that there's two different kind of sets of pricing, one for a signature by June 30th, one for that misses that deadline. And you'll see the prices are lower if they can get the deal done by the end of the quarter. And then as you kind of unpack each of the options, what you'll see is that there is a substantial discount if they're able to purchase a larger deal. Right. So essentially, we're proposing a win-win trade here. Right. If you can get a large deal done and get it done quickly, we can give you a great price. Right. Everyone's happy with that. Next up is the negotiation section, right? And this is where you're going to kind of think through what you believe the other side might do when you're having a negotiation conversation. You're going to think through how you might respond, and then you're going to specify exactly what pricing you might offer kind of in response. So here's the example, right? And so imagine that you get a call from the other side's procurement team. They're like, hey, we gotta talk about this pricing. Like let's meet next Tuesday at 3:00. So you'd come to this and you would sit down and you would do your best to predict kind of what their general position is going to be, how they'll justify it, and then what specifically do you think they're going to propose? And then you'll say, well, okay, this is the general theory behind our response. This is why we think it's fair. And then here are the specific numbers that we're going to offer. So the idea is this is a structured way to kind of get yourself to think through what might happen during that negotiation. Now, of course, there's no way to know exactly what they're going to say, but the more quality thinking you do before that call, the better the result you're going to get. So in terms of ways to take this forward, check out our website at www.psiselling.com, and you'll find resources on discovery, strategic negotiation, hiring, demos, sales writing, and onboarding. And best of all, we're happy to share a free copy of the negotiation strategy spreadsheet as part of a qualified conversation. So with that, most importantly, as always, happy selling.